OCN, open door, communication network. Our frequency. Watch us live stream 24 hours. OCN, giving the voice of the Lord.
Welcome to Iris Inspires, and I'm your host, Iris the Dream Whisperer. This is the first of many programs we have scheduled for you, and we just want you to know what our intentions are, and that is real people, real experience, and real hope. A few years ago, after the 9/11 experience, we had an event called Back-2, and it was an interfaith event centered around bringing people of differing thoughts and belief systems to a common ground. Where can we come to a common ground? And so lately, with the climate of the world, as we all know, there's a lot going on in the world, in our communities, in our families, and many of us have differing belief systems, but we have to find that common ground. We have to deal with what is most important to us. And one of the things that's important to us, our precious commodity, is our children. Isn't that right? So today we have a special in-studio guest, Ahmad Mansur, Dr. Ahmad Mansur.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful to have him here. He has an extensive background in education, training, working with young people. He has a new trend thought on what we can do in terms of the solution. We see that oftentimes one of the things that happens with our children is that they're ill prepared to be effective. And a lot of times we talk about our kids as if there's some extension of somebody else and not ourselves. Like
Absolutely.
Those kids.
Right, we put them over there.
Yeah, them over there, like we didn't give birth to any of them, or they're not in our families,
Sure.
right? They're not our nieces, our nephews, or our grandchildren, and etc. And so, Ahmad, you have an extensive background for over the past 20 plus years where you've been working in the educational system, working in the community,
Yes.
and you have a passion. I want you to share with our audience what your passion is.
Well, my passion, to your point, I think in our last economy, and my background is in education, workforce development, and really preparing people for the economies that we're advancing in now. And in our old economy, in the industrial economy, it kind of goes to what you said earlier, is that we have a tendency to kind of disconnect the kids from ourselves.
Yes.
Them over there, we'll put them in institutions and say, take care of them.
Yes.
But really, my passion is about bringing the connectedness between family and community and our institutions, which have a tendency to be bifurcated. Every day, kids wake up and they're kind of handed over. So they leave
to the educational system, to the teachers
system.
in the schoolhouse, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So really, my passion and what I see out there, that you have a lot of students that want to be part of a larger network, a larger system, and that supports their vision, their purpose, their passions. And I think kids have kind of moved away from their passions because we've kind of pushed on them, this industrial economy of this is what you need to do for work. And that's it. So it's, do the work. And if you look at the old industrial economy, that worked out fairly well for our grandfathers. They, the World War II generation. They woke up, went to work, put food on the table, and that was pretty much good enough for them. But really, what was disconnected from them were their passions and their purpose.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that in the economy, because you use the word economy,
Yes.
and so most times when we think about economy, we talk about money, right?
That's what we think.
Okay.
But really, once again, actually economy, you take the eco piece, it's really talking about ecosystems. So it's really about how you have different stakeholders who who are part of a system that has to work to do something on our behalf, and we get to tell it what it wants to do. So
I
we can-
like that.
yeah,
I
so,
like that. Good.
sure.
So it's a part of we are part of a system.
Absolutely.
And so what I'm going to do is bring it full circle and let you continue to talk about the how the passion of our children, making sure that they are being effective. One of the things, as you know, this is a Christian network, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a Christian to understand that our children are at stake. And many times there's a disconnect, even in our environment, where we mistake the passion of our children as not being connected to their divine purpose and their relationship with God. And so, or we want to force it to be something that it's not. And so when you talk about passion and making sure that we're directing them and being effective, how does that and what does that look like?
Well, I think, as we move forward, really providing kids an environment in which they get to experiment, and really, what I like to say, giving them an opportunity to run into themselves. So often, once again, we have a tendency to want to point kids, depending on which culture you're from, depending on what type of system you're from. We tell our kids, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to do this. Or you have kids that will kind of follow the tradition of their family. They will, you have 2 or 3 generations of police officers, or 2 or 3 generations of construction workers.
Or preachers.
Or preachers,
just tell you,
that's right.
Preachers, mama was a preacher, daddy was a preacher, and so everybody else is supposed to be going.
No, you're absolutely right. And so the best thing that we could do today is really take advantage of this opportunity to open up the world to our kids and let them really find their passion. Here we are with the internet. Here we are with the ability to travel at a fairly cheap price. We have an opportunity to really connect with anyone we want and design experiences that allows for our kids to kind of experiment. But in order for a kid to actually experiment and really find their passion, we have to allow them to do what I call fail forward.
That's interesting.
Yes.
You're saying fail forward.
Fail forward.
How do you do that?
So
adults don't want to fail forward.
No, you're right, and that's really the chasm and really the transition that we have to make. But in order for a kid to really find out, once again, run into themselves, they have to have an opportunity to take up different activities and try different things to see if it works for them. And if it doesn't, if they fail at it, that's totally fine, because it's really about the practice of learning.
Oh, I like that. The practice of learning.
The practice of learning. And so in our school system, unfortunately, the way we have our system set up is our grading system is A, B, C, D, F, and F is for fail. And so you're really talking about a system that does not encourage students to fail forward, because failing is a stigma. It's the scarlet letter. So the way kids...
it's made to, the child is made to feel bad or inadequate or not good enough. And then the fear evolves, and so it doesn't want to, you don't want to try things because you don't want to fail.
Absolutely. And as you know, I mean, the great work that you're doing, that it's all about getting over our fears. And the only way you can get over your fears is by actually trying something over and over again. Actually, when you think of, one of the biggest challenges for most human beings is doing what we're doing right now, and that is to speak in public.
Yes.
Right? There's a huge fear on that.
Yes.
Well, the most successful organization that tries to, that sets up a platform to help you feel comfortable with speaking and being in the public is Toastmasters, right?
Yes.
So what does Toastmasters do? From day one, they put you right on stage.
Yes, they do.
They want you to fail forward in that process, to get comfortable with the idea that your environment, it's not going to melt you down. You're not going to, crumble.
Life is not going to be over.
Yeah, it's not going to be over. So, but that's something that we have to cultivate in ourselves. That's a certain type of practice that we have to develop. And one more thing I'll say on this is that that's really the nature of our workforce for tomorrow and today. is really failing forward. We're moving into an entrepreneurial economy. And the thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have to feel comfortable with taking risk.
Yes.
You know, so there's an opportunity to really cultivate this type of passion.
Interesting, because one of the things I find in the whole concept of what you're talking about is if the parent, the adult, is having challenges
Sure.
with failing forward
Sure.
and being an active participant in the new new economy and making a difference. How do we bridge that gap between a child finding his or her passion, being the creative force that has the keys to actually can transform
Sure.
our communities and our
Absolutely.
families and the world, you know, the nation,
Yes.
the world at large.
Yes.
If we truly believe that they are our future,
Sure.
and I say they're our present, but if we truly believe that, how do we bridge that gap? How do we now move our educational system into a realm where our children are being productive and they're not just on a grading scale
Sure.
of memorization and not really.
No, that's a great question, and that's a question not only for parents but also for our educational system. And really, in order to bridge that gap, there's a couple of things that's occurring. One is really seeing how technology is allowing our students to have access on their own to resources, to really develop their own culture of what they call DIY, do it yourself. And so as you know now, students, they're learning how to learn on their own. They know that if they need to know how to do something, you're right, they'll
Right.
Google it or they'll go to YouTube.
YouTube,
And
that's
they'll
the
find
other
out how
one.
to do that.
Yes.
But that is a learning modality that is actually helping cultivate that sense of self-efficacy, of self-agency, all the things that you need in order to have the capacity to be a risk taker, and not risk like high risk taker, but to really risk in a sense of getting over your fears and really failing forward. And from an educational standpoint, we do need the educational system to stand up, and that's where leadership is involved. As you know, I'm a former dean of a college.
Yes.
And some of the work that I do with leaders across the world and the United States is really speaking to different learning curriculums and different learning modalities that doesn't necessarily look like the classroom of the past. We still have a classroom, as many people know, that harken back to the early or the late 1800s, really the early 1800s.
And that was all, if history serves me correctly, that was all designed to have a workforce, not to have a thinking, creative people
Absolutely.
that are necessarily being imaginative in creating change and creating environments where we all exist. So I'm hearing you say you do it yourself, because one of the things that I'm hearing, the first thing as a parent, is the internet is a dangerous place, right? Because there's so much exposure to so many things. How do we allow and give room to that with this, you have a range of things that one can get exposed to from A to Z.
The internet is the internet, which means that it is a reflection of all that we are in the world.
Okay.
And unfortunately, access to the internet without having certain controls on it has created certain problems. However, part of the educational process is actually learning digital literacy. And part of digital literacy is not only just learning how to find things, but also learning how to not get so focused in on a myriad of things that it takes you away from what your purpose is with using the internet. And there's no silver bullets, and I would never come here today and try to give you like a clear answer for that. But really, I think a lot of it is really about how we cultivate our students, our kids, to be very purposeful with the use of the internet. And really, the students that we have today, even though they're exposed to a lot of things, sometimes exposure, there's a failure analysis in being exposed to things. You get exposed to things and realize that, that group is not for me.
That's right.
This appears dangerous. So it really kind of helps you find yourself once again and find your community. And that's really the key with the internet, is finding your community that can help you develop and really kind of reach the goals that you would like to reach.
Well, one thing for sure, technology and the internet and all the things that are at our fingertips, it's not going away.
Right.
You know, at being exposed and finding that balance and teaching balance, teaching reliance and having a keen sense of self and God is of utmost importance.
Sure.
And I would say a combination of the education. Let me back up. So when you talk about education and changing and transforming the educational system, would homeschool be one of those vehicles?
Absolutely.
Or do you think the homeschool environment would be the best to help?
Well, no, you bring up a good point. So one of my favorite books is by a guy named Ivan Illich. He wrote a book called Deschooling Society, and he wrote it in the I think like the 1970s. The word I like is deschooling, because even though he wrote this in the 1970s, what it really speaks to is the world that we live in today in terms of the technologies, the access to resources, and really our ability to design our learning environments, right? And so in terms of homeschooling is a natural fit for the type of world that we're transitioning into, because it's really about learning platforms now. So learning platforms could be, you know, that school down the street, or it can be a virtual place. There's a lot of homeschoolers use these educational platforms like. Well, I don't want to
call any names out, but there are a lot of platforms out there.
You have different platforms, and then you have it where people are developing their communities to do things together. And so those communities are formed via the internet. And so really the whole purpose of how we move forward with education and transformation is just really understanding that you have an opportunity to design how you want your kid to learn. And it's not only just the environment, but it's also the learning style of your kid.
That's real important.
It's very important because, you know, in the past, once again, you were talking about the industrial system of education. There was really one way that was set up for your kid to learn. And now we know that kids are kinesthetic. They some are learners of visual arts, and also, you know, as we're learning more about autism, you know, so there are all these different ways of really designing learning to actually support where kids can be productive and feel confidence and a sense of efficacy about themselves.
I think this is awesome because we talk often about how we want to change our world, and we want our communities to be enhanced. And the only way I say this often in my workshops, our dream shops, and in our summits that we have, I talk about how we have to be willing to completely uproot the systems that exist and create new ones.
Absolutely.
In church, we hear a lot how we're to influence the 7 spheres, right? And we are to bring the kingdom of God in the earth, and et cetera, et cetera. But the only way to do that is you have to be willing to, and we're not talking about just picking up a Bible, reading it, and whatever your belief system may be, and just reading a Bible or a scriptural text. We have to really be willing to change, transform how we're educating.
Absolutely.
You know, if our children have different learning styles, if technology has presented platforms for us to have our children be more engaging and more entrepreneurial, you know, not just the workhorse. We don't like going to the 8-hour jobs we go to, so why we want to insist the kids do that? It baffles me sometimes, you know, but really being willing to shift our thinking around education. Adults have to be willing to shift their thinking around it so that children can have the opportunities that you're talking.
Well, you dropped a lot of nuggets there, and really all of those are totally in my wheelhouse. These are the things that I'm passionate about, and one I'll take, and that is you mentioned transformation. We need to have absolute transformation of our school systems, and part of transformation means that we can't just be blindly committed to to old educational models just
Yes.
because we have special interests in it.
Yes.
And so, like right now, I'm a big critic, even though I'm a dean and I worked many years in education, but I've always worked around entrepreneurism or entrepreneurial projects related to education. So even though I've been a dean and I've worked and I've had 250 employees and 6,000 students, one of the things that I'm really critical of today is this idea that students come onto campus, into the classroom, and that's still the model that we use. So one of the things that I'm really proposing around transformation is that kids don't have to show up on the campus, that they could show up in a team at a firm or at a community organization, right? And that you're facilitating their learning. So part of their learning that they can do self-directed things online, but also by the time they get together and they start working, they're working on practice.
Yes.
Because practice is really the key piece of the economy, because knowledge in itself is not enough. Knowledge is very cheap.
What did they used to tell us when we were going? Practice make what? Perfect.
Practice make perfect.
And we think perfect as being, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Yes,
Right.
that's good. But whatever that gift and talent, whatever that passion is that a child
Absolutely.
has.
And we got, I'm sorry,
No,
we
it's fine.
have to work that into our system, because we've always been a knowledge-driven educational system, meaning that, what's your knowledge acquisition? We always talk about the achievement gap, right? The achievement gap of how can you get X number of skill sets around math and English and all these type of things. Well, knowledge in history, knowledge is really your cell phone picking it up and really finding things right there.
Right.
It's really about cultivating talent. It's about talent acquisition. How do you develop someone's skills where they develop their gifts and talents by practice, by the experience, and by engagement with their peers, and by the environments of industry. One more thing I just want to say that you hit on, because you really hit a bunch of nuggets there. I'll be real quick with this.
Take your time.
And that is, you're absolutely right. In the past, we've really trained people just to be workers, right? And one of the challenges that we're dealing with right now is that work is disappearing. And so with work disappearing, or with it changing, people's identities are leaving them. And as a result of that, you see the anxieties that are coming up. And those anxieties are then spewed outward towards other people, and you start seeing tribalism taking place. That's all because we cultivated people just to be workers, when the nature of industry is to always move jobs away, to always automate. And so we really set workers up to really be without a sense of knowing who they are and what their true deep passions are. And so,
well, it's a modern slave, but you didn't hear from me. Oops. No.
No, you're right. And so this opportunity gives us to develop many dimensions around talent. So, we call it the T skills. So you have a particular skill set that you have, but also you want to develop your ability to be problem solvers for your community. You also want to find your deepest sense of purpose, so that you can take a deep dive and really be a contributor to society and be fulfilled in the way that in the past we really didn't really care about your fulfillment.
Right. Exactly.
You have to care about your fulfillment.
Right. And we have a miserable culture because of that, and we have illness at an all-time high. We have frustration where people are taking out their frustrations on others, taking machine guns and shooting people down, and for lots of reasons, but mainly I would say because they don't know purpose. And don't know who and why they've been sent here to planet Earth, and the contributions we are to make. And I think it's so awesome we were able to have a powerful dialogue today, although we may have some differing beliefs. And that's the purpose of, and the intention of this segment, was to show that it is very possible for us to come together, regardless to what our beliefs may be on a spiritual plane. But if we can come together on what we believe and where we can make the difference, we can then begin to see transformation in our communities. And education is one of the major spheres we need to see transformation with our children. So I think it's awesome. You know, I call you Mansour, but
Call me anything.
yeah, one of the things, you know, fulfillment. That's my baby. I think is important. We have a few more minutes left. What are some of the things in terms that you are implementing, or you are pushing forward in the arena?
Well, my mission is, so kind of like my official mission is to myself is to transform mindsets, to cultivate talent, and to bring forth transformational leadership in order to really
say that again. So let them hear. I want them to hear
you
that.
Want them to hear
Yes.
To transform mindsets, to cultivate talent, and to bring forth innovative leadership that really changes our communities and ourselves.
And how can they, if they want to reach out to you and
Right.
find out more about what you're doing? I know you have a conference that's coming up that looks, you know what, technology, y'all. No, it's coming is it reInvent?
Yes.
At the end of the month,
Yes.
Scheduled for October the 17th.
Yes.
So give a little information about
Sure.
that.
Well, the name of my company is called the Urban Economy Group.
That's right, Urban Economy Group.
So we're a global consulting and venture firm. And you asked me earlier about what am I doing. So one of the projects that we're working on is called Next Leaders, what we call NXTL. And that program is actually set up to work with students of color to really help them develop and cultivate themselves as global talent so that they can be competitive in our economy and actually go back into their neighborhoods with the same skill sets that people are learning at the highest level. And so that's a program that we're putting forth and we're getting funding for. And so I will be speaking at the reInvent conference, or reInvent event, which is actually with Lieutenant Governor Newsom,
Yes.
who some say will be our next governor. I'm sure there's some that says has something to say about that.
Yeah.
But also former Michigan Governor Governor Granholm, who obviously come from a state that has the old industrial model.
Right.
So it'd be very interesting.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to thank you so much for stopping in on our first
thank
show
you very much. I'm
here,
glad to be here.
At Iris Inspires, the first of many. I think, again, before I give a wrap up, give them
Sure.
the name of your company one more time.
Sure.
And it's reinvent.net is where they can find information about
It's reinvent.net. They will initially, after they do the event, because it's an invite-only event, they will then post the event online.
Perfect.
And so, because they're trying to create dialogue
Right.
around the future of work. So that's the topic, is the future of work. So I'm at urbaneconomygroup.com.
urbaneconomygroup.com.
Yes.
So I'm going to say thank you, Dr.
welcome.
Ahmad Mansur. Thank you for coming out today. You know, as I was saying, it is our intention to make sure that we bridge the gap. Real people, real experience, and real hope. We can only find that hope when we are willing to open ourselves up to hear and listen what others have to say. And then, you know, my grandmother used to say, and my mother used to say, you got to take the bones out and and eat the meat and take the bones out, right? And so we have to learn how to do that, regardless to what the difference is. Our children are our most precious commodity, and we often complain or talk about how the educational system is not living up to our standards in terms of how they're educating our children and what is going on in the schools and how legislation is allowing certain things to happen in our schools. Well, I submit to you that we have alternatives, and we heard today some alternatives of how we can make a difference and transform the educational system so that our children can experience their passion and not get stuck in a job or any circumstance or situation that they do not like. You don't even like it, so why are you pushing them to be in it? You know. So any closing inspirational remarks?
Well, I'll just say this. This may not be inspirational, but hopefully it is in a good way. So you're right. Us as workers, our generation, the latest poll is like only 13% of people would say that they actually really like their job.
13% say they like it. So we got work to do, people. We can do this. It's a matter of opening ourselves up and remembering that you are the miracle. You are cause and the matter, and your voice matters. Thank you for tuning in to Iris Inspires. God bless.
OCN, Open Door Communication Network. Our frequency. Watch us on live stream 24 hours. OCN, giving the voice of the Lord.